So first and foremost, thank you guys so much for coming here tonight. I really, really appreciate it. If you are attending this lecture live, you'll still need to complete the Unit 2 live lecture assignment where you have to write, I attended the live lecture. You still have to complete that assignment to get credit for attending. If you're watching this recording at a later time, that's perfectly okay. Your task for the Unit 2 live lecture assignment is slightly different. All you have to do is write down your three biggest key takeaways from this lecture, ideally somewhere spread out throughout the lecture, not just 3 points from the first 5 minutes or 3 points from the last 5 minutes. Make sure that those three takeaways are kind of spread out through the lecture, kind of indicating that, hey, you actually watched the lecture and paid attention and sat through the whole thing. So today, what we're going to be covering largely focuses around the researching process. That's kind of what this course is really designed around. In fact, it's designed around the 5 stages of the writing process, which we learned back in 1301, but we're going to continue on with that in English 1302. Now, there is an underlying assumption at this point whenever you come into English 1302 that you have some level of competence and confidence with APA formatting. So this is not going to be a focus at all in this lecture. However, I like to provide a very, very brief overview, no more than a few minutes, of talking about APA formatting, just in case that's an area that you're a little rusty on or that you need some extra work on. So there are 4 major components of APA formatting. And all of this can be learned a lot easier and more efficiently if you use the APA template, which I shared with you in Unit 1 for your discussion board feedback. I shared it also in the discussion board responses to your introductions. The APA template is worth its weight in gold, which, I mean, it's kind of silly to say because it's digital. So let's say it's worth its weight in digital gold. So I guess that's Bitcoin, right? So in any case, we've got cover pages, reference pages. If you don't know how to format them, follow along the APA template. You're also going to have sample papers for all the assignments in this course. So next to the instructions, next to the rubric, you're going to find example papers or sample papers that you can open up. So if you have any sort of doubts as to how your formatting looks, you can always refer to those sample papers and just mimic it. Look for the differences. And then the 2 other more nuanced components of APA formatting that always trip students up, whether it's in English 1301, 1302, or even some of the higher level courses, we've got in-text citations and references. Those always seem to trip students up. But there are some key tenets that you'll want to kind of keep in mind. So when it comes to in-text citations, almost 70% of the time, I would say, that's just a spitball number. You're going to use the author year or author year page method. And it would look something like this, where this is a parenthetical in-text citation that would be tacked on at the very end of the cited sentence. And it would have the author's last name, comma, the year of publication, comma, and then the page or paragraph number in which it appears. You would only use a physical page if the work that you're citing has physical page numbers. But a lot of online articles or even, online news articles, for instance, they're not designed for physical print, so they're not going to have an actual page number. In those cases, you'll have to count out the paragraph in which that quote appears. Again, this should all be refresher for you guys from English 1301. At this point, it's assumed that you know how to use these things confidently and competently, not perfectly. There's definitely going to be some learning curves and bumps in the road when it comes to this stuff. I will absolutely gently nudge you in the right direction when the time comes. Then with reference entries, the CSU reference guide is super long. I mean, it's like 100 slides of a PowerPoint. There's a ton of information in there, and they're probably the trickiest to master. So using some sort of automated tool like NightSight, if you just Google NightSight, you'll find it. It's a fantastic tool. It will be a huge time saver when it comes to building your annotated bibliography and building your reference pages in this course. So with all of that out of the way, let's get towards the gist of what we're talking about. So just as a quick refresher from English 1301, these are the 5 stages of the writing process. We've got preliminary thinking, researching, the thesis statement and the outline, the drafting, which is when you actually sit down and write your essay, and then proofreading, editing, and revising. This course is designed around these stages. And this particular lecture is going to be focusing mostly on stages 1, 2, and 3. So the whole course is kind of structured around these. So in Unit 1, this was our focus. It was preliminary thinking, right? We're on the discussion board. We're spitballing some ideas about our topic. Some of y'all have emailed me or sent me messages saying, hey, what do you think about this topic? What about this direction? Those are all signs of strong preliminary thinking. And that was our goal in Unit 1. As we look towards next week, our goal is to continue researching on this topic, and it will ultimately accumulate into our Unit 3 scholarly activity, which is kind of like an annotated bibliography. And then we get to stage 3, that's our thesis statement and our outlining. Again, those particular phrases should not surprise you or sound like a foreign language to you, because that was covered back in English 1301, and it's covered again here in English 1302 in the readings. So make sure that you're not skipping over that or glancing over that, because it all accumulates, it all scaffolds here. So the Unit 4 assignment is essentially this particular step. So you can see the first 4 weeks of the course are structured around the stages of the writing process, following them along. And you'll notice there's going to be some recursiveness between these, where, you know, sometimes your brainstorming is going to create some angles that you might want to research. You follow up on that research, and then instead of sitting back passively and just accepting that research for face value, you're going to ask yourself questions. That's another form of preliminary thinking, where you kind of have this recursive loop between them. We don't really want to get to a thesis statement or an outline until we have a really strong working knowledge of our topic and where we intend to take things. So that's really the focus of this particular lecture, kind of going up to this dotted line here. And then you'll notice later in the course, so week 7, unit 7, we have our final assignment. And that's what this entire course is kind of gearing up towards. So really, there's only one major paper in this course. You could kind of think of it as a capstone project, because everything that we're going to be doing now is going to lay the groundwork for that particular assignment. So as you can see, there's the timeline. And the beautiful thing about the writing process is that it is 100% scalable. So back in English 1301, this writing process was condensed to a mere week or so, or maybe 2 weeks, where, you know, you had the live lecture assignment in Unit 2, and then you have 2 full weeks to prepare for your personal narrative essay. If you took English 1301 a couple months ago, it would have been a slightly different format because there was some course revisions. But generally speaking, in English 1301 and most of the 1000 level courses, the writing process is somewhere condensed within a week or two. As you get into higher level courses, the writing process itself starts to scale outward, where it will take a full 7 to 8 weeks to build a certain project. And when you could even go to a master's level or even a doctoral level, and you could see how this writing process itself could span months or even years, where, let's say we're writing a master's thesis, we've got stage 1, 2, and 3. This could take 6 months alone, working through this particular process. And the drafting itself could take another 3 months. And then the proofreading could be another couple months. So this is kind of how the process is scalable in that sense. But 8 weeks, it's not super overwhelming. It's also not something that you can rush into and just turn in a hasty Unit 7 essay without planning ahead. Now, there's also a couple other things that carry over from English 1301, like audience analysis. Hey, you got to know that everything that you write, whether it's academics or the workplace, there's always a recipient in mind, always someone you're gearing your message towards. When it comes to academics, it's a little tricky. You might mistakenly think that I, as your professor, am your audience, but that's not really true. It's true in one sense. However, I am not really, yeah, the bottom line evaluator. It's really your rubric and your instructions. Your rubric and your instructions will always tell you exactly what the assignment expectations are. And when I grade and evaluate, it's always according to that, to what's in the instructions, what's in the rubric, and I follow it to a T as much as I possibly can. That way, everything is as objective and fair as possible. So, whenever you sit down and you start thinking about audience analysis in terms of academic writing and for schoolwork, always refer to the rubric as your audience. That's who you're writing it to, that is the recipient. That's who you're trying to influence or persuade. That's what everything is geared towards. And I did mention earlier, there's a couple of recursive loops here that are really important. Preliminary thinking and researching is a recursive loop where you can naturally bounce back and forth between stages 1 and 2 in a very organic way that doesn't feel forced. Um, so you'll notice in units 1 and 2, some of your ideas are going to jumpstart some trends of research, and then while you're researching you'll think of new ideas and maybe you'll start pivoting a little bit. That's all a part of the process, and it's very normal, very common, and it's something that we should embrace because this is not a strict linear process. It's not do this then that then this, and it's a straight line streamlined thing. There's going to be some built-in flexibility. There's also a recursive loop between drafting and editing, revising, proofreading. And again, that's going to be something that we will cover later in the course where, you write a paragraph, you go back and revise it. You write a sentence, you go back and revise it. And you're always kind of staying on top of what you're writing instead of waiting till the end and just having a big mountain of issues fall on your lap. One important thing, though, is that when we get to that Unit 4 assignment for the thesis and the outline, we want to be pretty darn sure about what we researched and where we intend to take our paper. This is kind of like the blueprint for your house. You don't want to start freelancing and modifying things because that's going to have this domino effect of unintended consequences later on. So you really want to do your due diligence. You want to take stages 1 and 2 very seriously, which is the first 3 weeks of this course, the first 4 weeks of this course. You want to take them deadly seriously. And you really want to get all your ducks in a row. That way, when you get to the thesis statement and the outline, things are going to start falling into place. And whenever you start writing your essay later in the course, sitting down, writing a 8 to 10 page plus essay with all of these sources that you're trying to juggle at the same time, things are not going to feel very overwhelming at that point. Things are going to start falling in line just as you planned them. It's kind of like building a house where if you just kind of go willy-nilly and you grab the nearest bucket of nails and pile of boards and start slamming things together, you're not going to have a very good product at the end. It's going to take a lot of planning, a lot of research in order to build that product in a professional, clean manner that will meet the expectations of your audience. Just a quick recap of stage 1, preliminary thinking. There are plenty of tools that we can rely on to kind of help us out, give us a little bridge between abstract and practical application. So brainstorming is fantastic. It's something that we do the minute we open up an assignment and we read its instructions. That's really when the writing process starts. A lot of students mistakenly think, oh, the writing process, that's when I sit down and write the introduction. No, so far off, not close at all. It starts the moment you read the instructions. When you start brainstorming about a topic and some ideas and some questions. Doodling, also a good tool for those that are way more creative than I am. I can't doodle. I can do stick figures, but I can't doodle. However, that doesn't mean you can't get the benefit of, visual guides and pictures and graphs. Sometimes, if you want to start getting your mental gears turning, look outside, go walk in nature, go Google image search something about your topic that you're trying to describe accurately. And instead of just trying to pin it all in a mental image in your brain, use those tools, use those visuals to your advantage. That way, when you sit down and you try to pull words out of your brain trying to describe these things, at least you're pulling them out of pictures now and pulling them out of experiences and real-time observations. Like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so you might as well put yourself in a position where you can benefit from it even if you aren't an artistic person. Clustering is something that we do every day, and I always like to give an example first because it makes more sense. Whenever you put the dishes away, you cluster your spoons with spoons, forks with forks, knives with knives. Whenever you put your clothes away after you fold them up and you're doing laundry, everything's got a particular spot and things are organized in a certain way. That's all clustering is. It's creating these abstract categories that you can sort your ideas into. So, a common, very common one is a Venn diagram. So, if you're faced with comparing and contrasting two different things, Venn diagram is perfect, right? You could start clustering and sorting ideas into different groups. That's just one form of many ways you can use clustering to your advantage. Mind mapping is kind of a blend between brainstorming and doodling, and you can look up examples on Google Image, and some people are absolutely brilliant, like their mind clicks like that. Mine doesn't. Again, it's a very creative process, and that's not for me. But I find that the concept of mind mapping is a lot like expanding a tab or something on, let's say, your computer, where if there's like a little condensed tab on your computer, it sucks all the files in, but you hit the little plus sign and then it pops them all out and expands them. Well, mind mapping is kind of like hitting that plus sign where it expands everything. So if you could picture a big stack of papers on your desk, and maybe you have a big stack of papers already on your desk, you look at it, all you could see is that very top page. Then you see the outside of it, right? The binding, or if it's just papers sitting on top of each other. There's really not much you can see visually besides that top page. If you get a little handsy with it, you could flip through a couple pages and you could see them. You could pick it up and look and see what's on the bottom, but your scope is so limited because you only know what's on the top. So that is a closed off environment to me. It's a closed off thing. So what you could do is if you've got some floor space, you can start sorting and spreading out your research in these papers across the floor. You start getting a big picture of what you're working with. So for this course, you're going to have 6 to 8 sources in your final paper. And instead of having them sit in a big stack next to you on your desk, use some floor space, print them out, put them out there. And that way, it kind of takes a mental load off your brain where you can start visualizing things a little bit easier. You could start using post-it notes, and you could start getting crazy. It could be like Miami Metro Homicide from Dexter. You start linking string from one thing to another, and before you know it, you've just got these big web of ideas sprawled out on the floor before you. Your family will come home and look at you and be like, "Are you okay? You good?" You're like, "Yep, just working on my project in English 1302. That's it, right?" But in any case, it is a useful tool. It's a good tool for the toolbox, and it works very well for this course. Free writing, don't confuse this with drafting. Two totally separate things. Free writing is like the brain dump. This is where you just get all that information out of your system. It's raw material. It's usually full of assumptions and bias and personal experiences, and some of that is great, some of that is not so great, but it's a good way to get that information just out and onto the page. But don't confuse that with essay writing because it's very different. Essay writing is a systematic thing. It's a systematic execution of the plan that you set in place. Right now, we're not even close to building that plan. We are just getting ideas. And then curiosity exercises, love this one. Absolutely love it. You can set a timer for 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, and just free write. So you don't care about grammar, mechanics, style, anything like that. You just write down as many questions as you possibly can about your topic. You could get 50, 60, you could get 100 questions down on the page in a short amount of time. And that's great. That's raw material. That's what we want at this point. But what you want to do is kind of step away for a little bit and return with fresh eyes. And you can start noticing themes. Maybe you asked the same question 10 or 15 different times in 10 or 15 different ways. You're like, maybe that's worth pursuing. Maybe I need to refine and tweak some of these questions, make it more researchable, and maybe that is something I can follow up on with my research. Now here we are, stage 2, researching. This is going to be a primary focus for this lecture. So what we want to do is focus on those open-ended questions. What that means is not easily answered with a simple yes or no. Yes or no questions, they're fine for leading to things like definitions or obvious facts. Those are great, right? Those have a time and a place to be used in essays. However, when you come across facts and definitions, those are also dead ends for research. You can't really do much with them unless you want to kind of go down the road of semantics or even philosophy, and you want to start challenging the basis of those definitions or the basis underlying those facts. But for the most part, you start, if you go down that path, you're starting to get away from the practical applications of what you're really trying to get to. So it can be a bit of a waste of time trying to argue about a definition or a fact, unless you've got really, really good reason to do so. I would recommend staying closer to the gray area, the places where there's no clear answers, where people are arguing and debating and hypotheses are thrown around, because that's where the growth happens. That's where we want to go. Ultimately, we want to research questions to spur more questions. We really want to go down that rabbit hole, and I'll give you guys a couple tools and strategies that elaborates on exactly what that means to go down the rabbit hole. We want to start developing a working thesis statement at this point. It's not too early to start figuring out what exactly we're going to be talking about our paper. What exactly are we going to be arguing? However, don't feel compelled and put yourself in a box like this is exactly what I have to argue, regardless of what comes up. You're going to want to be flexible with it. You're going to want to adapt your thesis, because when you jump into the researching process, you only start with what you know. You don't know what you don't know. And if you're researching like a true academic, someone with honesty and integrity, you are going to come across research that changes your perspective. Whether it bolsters your personal experience and your opinions and your bias, or if it contradicts, or if it opens your mind to a whole new line of thought, all of that's important. It's all going to impact that thesis statement. And speaking of which, when we are researching, in this particular course, there is a heavy emphasis on academic database, using the university library, which I'm going to show you how to use that very soon. But really, we want to research all the perspectives, not just the ones we agree with. We never, ever want to research to prove. We always want to research to find out. And it's always very apparent to me when students, try to cherry pick evidence and attack the straw man. It comes off very one-sided and obvious, and it's a big turnoff to those that you could potentially persuade. Now, kind of cycling back here, right? Because we really want to focus on bridging that gap between Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3. And how we're going to do that is asking good research questions. And your high school teacher, your middle school teacher, they were wrong. There are such things as bad questions. I won't go super long into a tangent about that, but the good thing is that, hey, there's effective questions out there too. It's all about how you frame it. So a terrible example of a question is, what is the meaning of life? And you've probably heard that bounced around before. Um, so there's three major reasons why something like that would be a terrible question. So number one, it's 100% subjective. It's completely based in your values and your experiences and maybe even faith based. So it cannot be answered objectively or scientifically. So really, whatever you decide or whatever stance you take on it could easily be kind of refuted just on the basis of that. Um, Number two, if thousands of years of philosophical debate hasn't put the subject to rest, it's probably not going to be solved in a 5 paragraph essay. You know, we might think very highly of ourselves and our ability and what our mind can create, and we feel strongly in our values, but let's be honest with ourselves, guys. We're not going to crack the code of what is the meaning of life in a very objective way that is convincing to anyone and everyone across the globe in just an essay in English 1302. You know what I mean? And lastly, irrefutable evidence to build an argument. I mean, first of all, it's sweepingly broad, but just thinking about the evidence that it would take and making sure it's irrefutable, we've got, I mean, it would take thousands of pages to try to build a sliver of an argument. So that's why this is a bad example of a question. But hey, what if we reframe it a little bit? What if, because something so subjective cannot be answered objectively, maybe we could reframe the problem statement a little bit. So instead of what is the meaning of life, you could ask, how could I live my life more meaningfully? Ah, some doors have opened up. Okay, so it can't be answered objectively. That's a bit of a problem, but it can be answered subjectively, and it can make meaning in your life too by answering this question. It could lead you to more insights about how you perceive life, your values, and how you can make decisions. And maybe, just maybe, that will resonate with your readers or your audience and find like minded people out there that would also care to agree with you and see your point of view. Um, so, yes, it's definitely more persuasive, it's more meaningful. And it definitely doesn't come off as so boisterous as saying, I know the meaning of life. That obviously can't be true. But how can I live my life more meaningfully? Hey, we can find a valid answer for that. And obviously, it doesn't come off as pretentious. Now, if we were going to write an essay for academics, though, that would still be a little too subjective, wouldn't it? It's still kind of heavily based in your personal experiences. And unless you're writing something like a personal narrative essay, it would be quite a struggle to try to reframe that in a way that is meant for academic audiences. So, what can we do? Well, let's narrow the scope a little bit more. So, here's a great example of how we can reframe that. So, what can Western societies learn from Eastern Asian philosophies and religion about a meaningful life? All right. So, we're not making any sweepingly broad claims as to what the meaning of life is. We're not zooming in so closely that we're only looking at our perception of the meaning of life. Instead, we're researching demographics, we're researching history, we're researching religions, religious history, and philosophy. So we have a plethora of evidence that we can start looking at. The scope is manageable, right? We're not sweepingly broad, but we're not so zoomed in that it's subjective. And we've got historical figures that we could start looking at, and it's contestable. It's not based on faith or religion or anything like that. It's purely academic and empirical and historical. You could even dive into cognitive science when it comes to something like this. It opens the doors, right? So good questions open the doors for further conversation and debate. Poor questions close all the doors. And that's kind of what I want you guys to take away from this, right? So we don't want to be so sweepingly broad and philosophical that our questions are impossible to answer. We don't want to be so subjective that, it only works for us and maybe a small group of people. We want to find something in the middle. So key takeaway, yeah, you don't need the answer, and you shouldn't proclaim that you have it either, because you don't. Again, you're not going to solve all the world's problems in a 5-paragraph essay. You got to pinpoint those questions that lead you down those meaningful, insightful, researchable paths. And you want your topic to be argumentative, right? Because you're researching about something, and proclaiming how it should be or how it should be viewed. And the nature of your question should capture and embrace that controversial nature, where you dive into that gray area, that area where the answers aren't just answered with a simple yes or no. So the key takeaway from this particular vein of thought that we're going down here: don't research to prove, always research to find out. So don't cherry pick evidence. It's obvious when you do. Don't attack the straw man. It's obvious when you do. Don't fall victim to groupthink, which is, hey, everyone else thinks it. It's the popular thing. So let me go ahead and join the crowd. Don't use faulty logic. Don't confuse correlations with causations. Anything that you've learned in a critical thinking course or a logic course, it would all carry over here when it comes to researching. Creating false dilemmas, right? We're not writing a political treatise here where we're trying to, create an ultimatum for our audience and our readers, like this is the only way or else the world is doomed. Like we don't want to, we don't want to be convinced by those arguments, because usually they're missing a few angles of interpretation. So we don't want to pass that kind of reading anxiety on to our readers either. And yeah, don't settle for crappy sources. We don't want to just pick the first thing that comes up on Google. The keyboard warrior who had a few extra bucks and made a domain name, and he's got a blog and writes whatever he wants and uses ChatGPT to spam it and get it to the top of the algorithm for Google. You know what I mean? So let's not settle for that easy fast food option of, yeah, let me just grab the first thing off Google. That's the fast food of research. We don't want it. We know it's not good for you. So why do you do it? Remember, Google is a search engine, not an answer engine. And again, when it comes to academics and embracing these questions and controversial nature of what we're discussing, if the answers were obvious and they were out there, why would we be talking about it? It's not going to show up on Google. All the hard problems that you're facing in the workplace, all the big dilemmas that come across your desk, they are not going to be easily answered in a simple Google search, right? So we have to look elsewhere. We have to dig into the weeds. Don't settle for the fast food of research. And the other equation here, right? We want to go into this with an open, curious mind. We want to discover, our blind spots. We want to be open to, exploring those perspectives. Ultimately, when we research, what we're not doing is just spitting out verbatim like what other people wrote. What we want to do is kind of synthesize those viewpoints in a way that makes sense for our thesis. So that's what I mean by a network of knowledge. We're pulling a little from here. We're putting them in conversation with someone else's ideas and theories and research and studies. And we're pulling them all together to create a network of things that are cross-referencing each other. Sometimes they're competing, sometimes they're bolstering each other, sometimes, that's just kind of how it goes. Surplus of seeing, we also want to look for those blind spots in our knowledge and experience. So just like you got blind spots in a car and you can only see what's in front of you on the road, you got to rely on your mirrors to see behind you and what's on each side of you. If you got a rear like a backup cam or a 360 cam. All of that is like your research. It's gaining a surplus of seeing. It's you seeing what you couldn't see just by yourself based on your own perception and knowledge and past experience. That's why researching is so important. It's finding those blind spots. And there's also some interesting things when you start really digging into the research where you start exploring the fog of war. So if you've ever played a video game where it's kind of war based and you look at a map and you just see what's in your immediate vicinity, but you don't know where the enemy is and you don't know how to get there, you're not quite sure what's on the other side of that hill or that mountain. Um, that's considered the fog of war. You just don't know what's there. So instead of avoiding those areas, you want to seek them out. And if those research articles are kind of beating around the bush, they haven't discovered it either, that's something to talk about, not neglect. It's something to say, hey, you know, this is a particular area in the research. I've noticed that there is a lack of evidence and a lack of study. And this is something that probably should be prioritized in the near future, right? Something to talk about. Um, Obviously, we want to leave out the emotions, the politics, the religion, because then we start getting more into irrefutable evidence that's based on faith and religion and opinion, right? You could say that you like blue cheese with your pizza, and if I tell you no, you should do ranch instead of blue cheese, I could tell you until I'm blue in the face, I'll never change your opinion because it's a matter of preference, right? So if you start basing your arguments in preference or faith or politics, you're just going to, beat your head into a brick wall over and over, and it's not going to get through to your readers because that's not the avenue to persuade. That's not the right way to do it. So yes, we got to be honest. We got to have integrity. Now, when it comes to using the academic database, I'm actually going to give you guys a bit of a tour through it. But first, let's cover through these slides before we switch the screen over and actually dive into the academic database. So you always want to have some sort of research word or phrase, nothing terribly long. It doesn't need to be a full sentence. Just one or two key words that will give you a nice kind of haystack to sift through, right? When it comes to academic databases, it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. So give yourself a haystack first, and then I'll teach you guys how to kind of make that haystack smaller and smaller. Researching, you could use the Boolean codes and or surrounding them in quotation marks. There are library seminars that teach you exactly how to use these effectively and how they can impact your search results and so forth. I'm not going to go too in depth with them right now. Just know that you can use these Boolean codes to further specify what you're trying to find. And lastly, the filtering tool. This is absolute key. You are going to make your money with the filtering tool. And ideally, whenever you come across a researching type of scenario like you will in this course, you're going to want, okay, here's your research phrase. It's going to be closely linked to the research questions that you've already developed, and it's going to be obviously related to the main topic that you're going to want to talk about. For this example, I've just got human cloning and ethics. I use two different sets of Boolean codes in this example. So we've got these quotation marks here. That means human cloning has to appear in the search results in sequence, just as I wrote it. So if it's human and cloning, that means they could arrive in any sequence. But because I put them together in the quotation marks, the search results have to have human cloning, nothing in between, not separated by paragraphs. It has to be together. And the Boolean code and means ethics must be included with human cloning. If I use the Boolean code or, only one or the other would have to appear in the search results. But because I want to make it as specific as possible, I want to use the Boolean code, and that way every single search result will have both of these guaranteed. And then, of course, we click the scholarly peer-reviewed checkbox, and then we can proceed. So the goal, it's kind of like a game here, right? We got 7,804 results. That's a huge haystack. If we're trying to find 6 to 8 resources, that this haystack is way too big, because we could sift through page after page after page, and we might be so far out of relevance. Even though it says sorting by relevance, that's not necessarily true. It's only relevant to the terms that you gave it. So what are we gonna do? How are we gonna make this a more manageable haystack? What we got to do is go to the filtering tool. We're going to start with the obvious things, right? So we don't care about magazines or news or books or full-fledged reports. We want just the academic journal articles. Okay, that's starting to cut down a little bit. Hey, I can't speak Spanish or German or Persian, so let me click the English box. You can see right there, that's almost 100 articles cut off right away. And then you can start narrowing down the subject. This is where you're really going to make your money. So you can narrow down those 7,000 down to a mere 451 just by filtering down the subject. So human cloning, and we are concerned about stem cells in this instance. And then you can go back, rinse and repeat, narrow down the subject again. Let's say in this case, difference between mammalian embryo and regular embryos. And hey, let's focus on human embryos here. Perfect. And then you could narrow down the subject again if you needed to, where it's like, okay, we got cytology, we got embryology, human biology, but hey, let's cycle back. Let's make sure it's all related to cloning. And then here we go. With our 6 filters, we have successfully narrowed down our haystack into a manageable 26 results. That's fantastic, right? Based on all our filters, they shouldn't just be chosen willy-nilly. They should be strategically chosen to maximize your results and make sure that they are as closely relevant as possible to what your topic is going to be about. So let's, just take this for what it is. 26 results, that's pretty fantastic. But if you don't get down to double digits or even single digits, you can refilter your results, or you could build a brand new researching string where instead of human cloning and quotation marks, maybe you separate them. And maybe instead of saying cloning, you could use a different phrase, right? You could start tinkering with it if you don't find what you're looking for. And another thing is, with 26 articles, these 26 articles could be 20 plus pages long each, right? Like worst case scenario, you could be looking at over 400 pages of reading with just 26 articles. So what are you going to do? You're not going to sit down and read through all that. There's no way. What you're going to do is you're going to scan those abstracts. You're going to look for keywords or phrases, because the abstracts are only about a paragraph long. So 26 paragraphs versus 400 plus pages of dense research. I'll take the 26 paragraphs. And if something catches my interest, if those keywords pop out at me, maybe I will trust it enough to dive into the full text. And then let's say worst case scenario happens, right? Out of those 26 results, only one abstract stood out to you. You dive into it and you're like, this is great. I found one, but now I need 7 more. So what do? Well, yeah, you could go back and start from scratch again. Or you could fish for sources in the bibliography, which is a fantastic thing to do. So if we're going to start fishing for sources, this is kind of one thing we can work with. So step number 1, you got to find a reliable source that works with your topic. In this case, here we are, right? Moral qualms, future persons, embryo research, David Shaw. So we read the abstract and we're like, okay, this is kind of where we want to take our paper. This seems like it's going to be really relevant. What are we going to do from here? We're going to look at the bibliography, right? After we read through the full text, maybe there's a couple paragraphs throughout that really stuck in our mind. We're like, hey, that was the best paragraph in this essay. It's the most relevant to what I want to talk about. Let me see who they cited. And then you could start going down, scanning through the bibliography, looking for that source. And then you're like, oh, here it is, pinpoint it. That's the one source that caught my eye. Or sometimes it's multiple, right? So what you could do is you can copy and paste this entire bibliography entry and be like, okay, let's go ahead and throw that into the search bar and see what comes up. Voila, there it is. It's right at the top. These sources do not exist in a vacuum. They are actual research. They're not just things that they type down at the bottom of the essay. It's not like ChatGPT where it's just going to produce a bunch of fake, false, nice sounding research articles to kind of fluff up a bibliography. It's not like that whatsoever. These exist out there. You can read them for yourself. And what better way to start building a network of knowledge than starting to see how these articles are in conversation with each other? That is probably one of the biggest keys to developing strong research papers and strong master's theses and doctoral dissertations. It's immersing yourself into those conversations, seeing what ideas are being passed and forth, back and forth between each other. A lot of them are in call and response. Sometimes they just glean certain ideas from each other. Sometimes they're in competition. Sometimes they challenge each other. Sometimes they build upon the previous research. There's a million and different ways, but the important thing is there's a relationship there. There's a dynamic to explore. And the more you start putting yourself into that and overhearing that conversation, the more you're going to understand and the more you're going to be able to bring to the table when it's your turn to add something to the conversation. So let's say you've got 6 to 7 sources or maybe even more. You still have to do some record keeping in order to keep up on all of them. Going back to the mind mapping, yeah, you could definitely have them as a big stack of paper on your desk, but it helps to be able to take some notes on them, spread them out a little bit, and make more sense of them. This will become really important for the Unit 3, the Unit 4 assignments coming up, being able to keep track of your research. So we've got a couple simple acronyms here. Nothing you need to memorize whatsoever. They're just tools in the toolbox, things that you're going to want to look out for, things that you're going to want to keep in mind. So credibility, obviously, relevance, the authority that it's coming from, right? Not a random keyboard warrior, but hey, we found a reputable source in a reputable journal. Is it accurate? Is it, super outdated, or is it fairly new? What's the ultimate purpose? Is it informational? Is it persuasive? We also have a couple other ones. We've got the STRAP acronym here. So this is your subject, type of article, the role of the authors, the audience, the purpose. It really is kind of a rehashing of the CRAP acronym at the top. And you could also use 5 W's and the H, whatever clicks for you, whatever helps you keep those articles straight in your mind or straight on paper. Use it. Just make sure that you're not just putting those articles in a big stack next to you on your desk and not trying to organize them whatsoever. An example of an annotated bibliography, this is kind of what we could look at. So this will matter when you're looking down at your instructions and rubric for the Unit 3 assignment coming up soon, because you're going to have to do some annotated bibliographies. And this is kind of a more intense one. This is actually one I borrowed from the annotated bibliography that I had to write when I was writing my master's thesis many years ago. And basically what you're kind of looking at here, though, is trying to keep it simple, right? All of this, it seems like it's kind of fluff, or maybe it's kind of dense material, but all it really is record keeping. It's using STRAP, it's using the W's to summarize your sources. You talk about how it can help you in your paper. And as you can see, you don't want to think of it in isolation of itself. So up here you can see we're talking about one particular book. We summarize it a little bit. And then down here, we talk about how it can impact the thesis. And we don't look at it in terms of how it functions isolated, but also in the context of other sources that we've also researched. Um, so that's kind of the purpose of the annotated bibliography. It's just a fancy way of record keeping, keeping your sources straight. Couple other ways you could start building on that is building based on the Toleman model. So this is, I'm not going to go super in depth here, but whenever you're building an argument, these are the major components that comprise of a strong argument. You're going to have the grounds, the warrant, the backing, the qualifier, rebuttal, and the claim. There's YouTube videos out there that can explain this in greater detail. We don't have the time to go super in depth with it. Just know that this rebuttal component is really important. That's the thing I kind of want to emphasize here, the backing and the rebuttal. So whenever it comes to arguing something academically or otherwise, it's important to do your due diligence and research all perspectives, not just the ones you agree with. You have to anticipate these rebuttals and address them in real time. That's important. And speaking of arguments, diversifying your resources is also a fantastic idea. We are a little bit limited in regard to the scope and assignment instructions in English 1302 because there's a high, heavy emphasis on academic publications. However, I just want to let you guys know that's not the only way you can find outside sources that are meaningful and relevant to your argument. So this conclusion, it's not an academic conclusion. You could think of this as a logical conclusion. And these are your premises supporting that logical conclusion. So you could also think of this as your thesis statement, and these are your supporting reasons for your thesis statement. Whatever framework helps you conceptualize that, that's kind of what we're looking at. So let's just imagine that's your thesis. Here's your reason X, your reason Y, your reason Z, your reason alpha, all supporting points directly related to your thesis. We don't have just academic publications. We can diversify. We don't have to put all our eggs in one basket. Just like a financial advisor would, at least a good one would tell you to diversify your portfolio. Same thing applies to arguments. You want to diversify your argument. That way, if one particular premise kind of falls through, it doesn't jeopardize the entire argument. So we've got expert opinions, and this is not to be confused with scholarly opinions. This is, sitting down with your fire chief of 40 plus years of experience and saying, hey, fire chief, let me conduct an interview with you and let me record a transcript and let me get some of your ideas on paper. And that way I can include this as an appendix to my paper in English 1302. And I can cite you and share your knowledge with others. Share it with the academic communities. Boom, right there, expert opinion. So when we think of expert opinions, it's not the news anchor, it's not the podcaster per se. It is someone who has so much time and experience in the field that they never got around to writing a dissertation or conducting a 10 years experiment, studying some sort of demographic or safety trend. They've been too busy in their community, in their department, in their city, making real world differences that, we got to capture that knowledge before it's lost, right? We've also got laws, and you could think of this as like legal cases, sure, but you could also think of it as your NFPAs and your OSHAs. This is definitely a worthwhile place to, put some eggs into a basket. We've also got media, and this isn't to be confused with like mainstream media or anything like that. This is really just current events. What's happening right now in our country? What's happening now in our city or our community? What's happening right now? Maybe even across the world. Is there new technology being developed in some other country or some new pilot program that's being developed somewhere? And hey, let's pay attention. Let's keep our eyes open to what's happening now. We also have the benefit of looking into the past, historical examples. And this doesn't necessarily need to be something like in 1905, the fire department in Boston did blah blah blah. That's yeah, okay, cool, right? But let's make it more practical. Let's look at the historical examples from, let's say, our department. Maybe you can crunch the numbers, right? You got the you got the statistics available. You could start crunching some numbers, historical trends, maybe. You start crunching the numbers yourself and say, hey, we've had a dramatic decrease in structural calls. Um, our MVAs and rescue calls are just about the same, but our medical calls are going through the roof. Every single year, we've seen an increase percentage wise in the number of medicals that we've ran. So, how could we stay ahead of that curve and adapt and overcome and anticipate potential problems down the line? If this trend continues, how can we stay ahead of it? So that's what I mean by historical examples. Doesn't necessarily mean decades ago. It could just be a year or two. It could be 5 years. It could be 10 years. And just looking at trends that have not been captured by someone else, you actually going and crunching those numbers. Statistics, like they say, 70% of the statistics you read online are made up. And that one was also made up too. But with all jokes aside, there's some eggs to be placed in the statistic basket. As long as, you do your diligence and you understand the studies and, you know, the applicant pool and how many people they've actually polled and where those demographics come from. It's silly when the news, all the news agencies are guilty of it. When election time comes around, there's always like a poll, and nobody ever gets access to the poll. But somehow, whatever candidate is favored on that platform is always in the lead somehow. You know what I mean? Like, oh, they're ahead in the polls, and it's like, well, yeah, the poll was like 1,000 people, and nobody heard of it. Like, where did it even come from? It's all made up. It's all made up. But in any case, there are some actual serious statistical research studies that you can find in academic publications that can be insightful and meaningful. And lastly, you got a couple eggs in the assertion basket here. That's your real world experience, your opinions, your biases that you carry into these arguments, because we can't completely dismiss and we cannot completely silence ourselves and our experience. Everything that we come across will always be filtered through our perspective. So there's always going to be some eggs in this basket, whether we try to add those eggs or whether we try to eliminate or limit them as much as possible. There's always going to be a small percentage there. And sometimes it just kind of depends on the needs and wants and expectations of the assignment. So in, let's say, English 1301, when you had to write your personal narrative assignment, pretty much 90% of your eggs were assertion based. They're all based on your personal experience, and that was 100% acceptable. Um, but in English 1302, we have to meet the audience where they are. We have to understand the expectations and the instructions and rubric, and we have to understand that these assertions now have to be minimal in order to reach the objective. So if we're going to look at an appropriate balance for, say, your Unit 7 essay in this course, I would say 80% of your eggs have to be in the academic publication. And then the other 20% can be evenly distributed elsewhere like legal cases, NFPAs, OSHAs, expert opinions, and you might only want 1% or less in your personal experience and assertions. Every assignment's going to be a little different. A lot of assignments in academics are going to kind of overemphasize this particular egg basket, though. Now, there's also an important thing here, right? So all those green boxes that we saw, those were all offensive, right? They're all advancing our perspective and our argument in a direction that proves how we're right. But we also have to anticipate those rebuttals because, again, if all the answers were super clear and everything is sunshine and rainbows, there wouldn't be a controversy. There wouldn't be discussions and conversations and doubt about things to begin with. So let's make sure that we do our due diligence. We research all those perspectives and we research to find out, not to prove. So you got to anticipate those rebuttals and where they might fall in terms of your argument. One final thing, this is going to be really helpful in your Unit 4 assignment, and this is absolutely worth taking a picture of. It's a thesis statement and an outline. Again, we are rehashing a lot from English 1301 here, but a lot of instructors don't teach this particular formula. This is actually something that I've made for my students in particular. So you're not going to find this in a textbook or ChatGPT or whatever you use. This is something that you're only going to find here in this lecture. It's this thesis statement formula right here. Even though the opposing point of view, my stance is nevertheless important because X, Y, and Z. You can see those three components are incredibly important. We've got that built-in rebuttal. We've got our stance. And then we don't just settle with something simple and mediocre and mundane. We add in our evidence at the end. And that's how you can make a bulletproof thesis statement for, I would say, the majority of the assignments that you have to write in your academic degree program. It's a fantastic, fantastic tool, very useful, very flexible. You could use it for expository papers, persuasive papers. You start getting limited when it comes to personal narrative essays because the scope and objective is totally different. But in this class, this thesis statement is absolutely golden. It will work absolute wonders. So that's kind of where we are here, right? So this entire lecture covered weeks 1 through 4. And then in Unit 6, that live lecture is going to be more focused on actually drafting your essay, proofreading, editing, and revising strategies, really hyper-focusing on that Unit 7 assignment. But everything that we discussed here today is 100% relevant to what you're going to be covering in the first couple weeks of this course. So it follows along the writing process as we discussed. And it's pretty awesome, right? That's the way the course is laid out. It's very systematic and methodical. We're not rushing you guys straight into an assignment, which can feel a little bit overwhelming at times. Everything is going to be focused on that. So you guys have any questions at all? Wow, we've got 12. That's awesome. 12 students here. That's great. If you guys want to stick around with me here for the next minutes or so, I'm going to go ahead and do a dive into the university library and just give you guys a quick glance as to how the heck you could do that filtering strategy that I talked about earlier. If you guys have to leave for whatever reason, I completely understand. We're over the hour mark now, and here on the East Coast, it's 7 p.m. My girls, they're almost 4, almost 2 years old, so bedtime's coming up. You may have heard them crying in the background. So if you got to go, you got to do your thing, get dinner done, whatever, completely understand. You guys can always revisit this later on, but just know that you're not actually missing anything too crazy because we've already covered it in the lecture through those slides. I just want to give you guys an actual visual walkthrough of how to use that filtering tool, that filtering method that we talked about. So without further ado, let's go ahead. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And let's see here. So somebody in the chat, you can, unmute or you could type. Just give me a topic that you're writing for your paper. Give me a topic, anyone. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hey, Professor, I'm doing physical fitness for firemen that post their first year. So, like, we had to have a physical agility test to get hired, and then we do
Okay.
nothing after that.
Okay. So we're looking at firefighter fitness here, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and see what we can find on this. We're going to do kind of a broad stroke, right? But I want you to kind of help me along here based on, the topic that you're going to have for your assignment. So let's go ahead and click that scholarly box. And as you can see, this is just the Columbia Southern University Library website. You can find it on the home page. You can click on it, and this is what it'll take you to. So the way you would start is, you would have the keyword here. You click that scholarly box, and let's say we want, let's see, Ooh, we'll type in firefighter and fitness. And let's see what comes up. Let's see what happens. Oh, it's asking me to log in. Here we go. Sweet. Usually it'll have you do that. So firefighter and fitness, what did we get here? As you can see, we got 4,352 results. That's kind of like cable TV back in the day. There's 5,000 things on TV and there's nothing to watch. That's basically what we're looking at here. And maybe, some of these at the very top, they might work for you, maybe. But, like this one here, that's not going to work for me. And it's listed as the third most relevant. So let's see what we could do here. Let's start with the obvious. We want academic journals. So just by clicking this, we're going to go ahead and chop
Not,
off 50.
not to interrupt you, Professor, your screen's still
Yeah.
on the search. I can't
Uh,
see.
oh, you know what? It built a new tab. I'm sorry. So let's go ahead and stop sharing that one. Thank you for letting me know. Because it added a new tab, it just kind of sent me for a whirl there. So there we go. Okay, so you can see me now, right? So we got firefighter and fitness, and you could see we had 4,000 results here. We've got a couple at the top that might work for us, but I can't speak Arabic. I think that's Arabic. I'm not quite sure, but you're going to come across things like that where if you're just searching 10 at a time and you've got 4,000 results, it's going to be, kind of tricky. So the first thing we could do is click academic journals. I've already clicked that one, and it's shaved off about maybe 50 or so from the results. Now what we could do, we could click that all filters button on the side, and now we can start looking at our other filtering options here. So the obvious things are, hey, let's filter by language because, I can't speak Turkish. So let's go ahead and click that and we'll apply it. So now we're starting to cut down our results a little bit. Let's go ahead and hit our publishing date. So we could do a custom range here, right? Because, naturally firefighter fitness is going to be different now than it was, let's say, 20 years ago. So, but we also don't want to completely neglect it either. So let's go ahead and just say past 10 years. For the English 1302 Unit 7 assignment, it says the last 5 years. That's not completely firm. You could go past it if your topic necessitates it. However, it also just depends. Some topics, like if we're looking up something that's related to, I don't know, like AI technology, 5 years ago is irrelevant. past 12 months is probably going to give you the best, best and most current information, because those fields are just so fast moving. It'd be kind of hard to find something from 5 years ago that's still relevant today. With fitness and health, 10 years ago, yeah, we're pretty much in the same boat. So let's go ahead and hit apply for that. So we went from 4,000 and a half down to, a little under 3,000. Not bad, not bad. We're getting there, right? So now let's go ahead and filter it by the subject. This is your real moneymaker here. This is the moneymaker. Because it's going to dwindle it down faster than you can think about. So you can see even here, there's specific ones geared towards just military personnel. So firefighters in the Air Force and the Army, Marines, so on and so forth. So go ahead and give me a subject that kind of interests you for your topic. Go ahead and unmute and let me know.
Yeah, so mine's going to be, should we be doing annual tests for full-time firemen to, to continue the job, to evaluate them, to say, you're physically able to do this job versus you're out of shape, you're not able to do this job right now.
Okay. All right. So as you can see, we've got a lot of options here. Like tons of options here. So let's go ahead and start from the top. So maybe, and we could click more than one, by the way. Just be mindful that the more you click, the more diluted your results are going to be. So, okay, job performance is something that we might want to consider here. An exercise test might be something we want to consider. So let's just go ahead and roll with that for now. We'll update those selections, and you can see that after that applies, we are going to dwindle down our results. Oops.
And maybe a better one would be fit for duty.
Fit for duty? Okay, let me take a look here. Did you see that over here in the column somewhere?
No, I'm trying to give you easy search terms to look up.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, risk factors, that's definitely something to think about too. I mean, heck, it even goes down to grip strength in particular. That's pretty wild. There's 13 of them that just talk about grip strength. Wild. So I don't know if I hit that. So yeah, I definitely hit job performance and exercise tests and apply. There we go. So yeah, so we went from almost 3,000 down to just 120 just by applying those filters. But then we can also go back to the subject. And now these are sub-subjects that you can also add on to it. So if we are concerned with just aerobic capacity, we can look at that. Muscle strength standards, perhaps, right? Maybe we could look at, let's see what we got here. All the options. We also have this one, the Whitney U test. I don't even know what that is. Let's check it out. Let's see what we can find. Let's go ahead and apply it. So now we got 5. We've got physical fitness test performance firefighter trainees, differences between graduated and released trainees and predicting academy graduation, published in 2024. Seems like something we might be able to be interested in. Okay, active duty firefighters can improve functional movement screen scores following 8-week individualized client workout programs. So if you're more interested in like problem solution and being able to provide a solution in your workplace, hey, maybe something like that might pique your interest. Here's an interesting one. It comes from a different country, so obviously something that would probably be foreign to a lot of firefighters here in the U.S., but lower back pain, definitely an issue in a lot of fire departments. Heat strain, right? So maybe we're starting to get away from it a little bit. So yeah, we've got 5 potential sources. Honestly, based on what you're telling me, these first 2 are probably the most relevant, maybe worth looking into. Um, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, no, very, very helpful. All the classes that I've been through and just trying to run through this is, I mean, this is the first class that's ever kind of gone into the filters and kind of diving deep into some of the
Yeah,
articles and that. So very, very helpful. Appreciate it.
yeah, of course, yeah. And again, let's say you did all this filtering, right? And you're just like, man, I don't know what to do. Like this seems like I feel like I'm getting nowhere. All you got to do is go back and be like, okay, well, all of these were fine. English, academic journal, job performance, exercise test, but hey, the Whitney U test, let's get rid of it. Let's kind of back up. We start with those 120. You could back up as many times as you really need to. And then you could just kind of sift through them, read the abstracts. So whenever you click on one, personality fuels the fire, predicting firefighter physical readiness. Hey, maybe this is something we could talk about. You can look down, you could read the abstract, which again, you don't have to go through the entire article itself to get the gist of what it's talking about. Just read the abstract, see if it's something that might be worth it. They always have other things that kind of go along with it. So some of the subject terms might give you an idea of what the subject or what the abstract is going to talk about. And if you like it, then you could just go ahead and get the full text or the PDF and sift through it. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and take a look at it. Let's open it up and you can read this. This first section is the abstract. So the abstract's always going to be at the very top of these papers. Um, we skim down. Let's say you're like, this particular this source right here was pretty cool. Like you read that paragraph and you're like, hey, that one's pretty cool. Let me go ahead and copy and paste it and see if I can find it in the database simply by clicking out, typing it in. And again, they don't exist in a vacuum. So let's see here. Jorge, Fabio. Let's see. This is effects of interventions. So it might be in here somewhere. And if not, we might just have to chop off the authors here and just go with the title and see if we can find it. And if you can't find it here, the effects of, okay. So we're not finding it here in this database. Maybe it's not peer reviewed, and maybe it's not the last 10 years. And then maybe we'll find it. No, still not finding it. Maybe one of our filters is kind of getting in the way here. Maybe it's not at our library. Maybe. There we go. There it is. We found it. So all we had to do was get rid of a couple filters. We found that article. It was published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science 2019. And we can look through it. We could read the abstract. Maybe it's worth diving into. We're not quite sure yet. And if we can't get a PDF of this, what we might have to do is go to google.com/scholar and see if we can find it. So google.com/scholar, look at the articles, type in the name, and here it is. It's up at the top. And voila, we found it. And we can download and read the full text there. So pretty cool when you start, sifting through all of these different fishing for bibliography tools, and you start learning how to navigate in the academic database. You just got to be a little persistent with it and be patient with it. And you can find so much stuff, you know. You're not going to find relevance in those first articles that come up in that initial search, but if you give it enough time, you'll find what you're looking for. So that concludes it. That's really what I wanted to do there at the end. So I hope that little demonstration was helpful for you guys. I really appreciate you guys sticking around to watch it, because you know, sometimes walking you guys through it gives you a little bit more confidence in your ability to kind of handle it and go through it yourself, rather than just listening to the PowerPoint. But I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now.